We've got New York politics expert, the top expert, in my opinion, Ross Barkan, of his self-titled Substack and many other publications here. And I apologize to those of you who just want sports media criticism. We might do a little of that. We perhaps exhausted our reserves, though, of Ross's favorite topic, which is the media's conspiracy against the MLB and downplaying its popularity.
Ryan fought a good fight for me. Ryan, I DM'd him. I thanked him. He battled for me, and I appreciated it. It was good to be validated.
Well, yeah, he battled for you, and then you jumped in the comments and you battled some more. So I don't know. I don't know if there's any more meat on that bone, though. We can talk about whatever sports media topics you'd like to discuss. It's election week, though. We have to talk some election. If you don't want election talk, I hear you, people. We're not going to be doing this all the time. But hey,
one though, they got to sit through it. I think they want it to. I think everyone. This is the week. This is the week you get it. Maybe next week.
I'm just defiant. I'm doing what so many people do in media, which I think is so bad. It's, hey, if you don't like it, go away. Unsubscribe. I don't need you anyway. I don't want a person like you. No, look, we're just going to try to do what we do, to be dispassionate, to think about what's happening, to try to look at it from multiple angles. And I'm punchy after writing about Dan Le Batard. Normally when Ross is on, I have a little organized list of questions to ask. I do not have that. We are just flying free and easy, like the Joe Rogan podcast that Kamala Harris did not attend. We are doing the weave up here and discussing where we're at in America. I think the first thing, you know what you remind me of, Ross? You're a little bit like, because you are more a man on the left, but you're also a Cassandra who is critical. There's a secret about the NBA that people don't know, which is that even though the coaches obviously want to win, a lot of coaches, it's so weird when you know them in private, when the team loses and gets eliminated from the playoffs, part of them kind of likes it. I'm not saying you like it, but there's a part of them when you meet with them afterwards that goes, you see,
there is,
because they've been warning these guys. They've been warning them.
I will say this. Here's what I'll say about that. There was such a thoroughness to the defeat of Kamala Harris. It was so inarguable, so stark, so bigger than I thought it would be. And I was someone who still felt she could very much win the election, that all excuses are completely out the window. And there is something cathartic about that. Excuses in terms of all the 2016 chatter. Comey, Bernie, New York Times. Now it's pro-Palestine. Then it's Jill Stein. Then it's the Russians. Like it's done. You have to sit and stare at a map in which you got annihilated in the context of the Republicans haven't won a popular vote in 20 years, and almost no one was forecasting that. And it's an electoral college landslide. You lose all 7 swing states, whereas the Democratic senators in these swing states are winning. And that's also fascinating now.
Yes.
Nevada, Jackie Rosen came through. Slotkin in Michigan came through. Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin came through. So the Senate majority for the Republicans is not even going to be that large. But Harris herself, at the top of the ticket, is just really just beaten badly. I mean, worse than perhaps any Democrat since 88. You're talking like Dukakis, Bush, and coincidentally, she had the lowest share of the vote in New York City since 88, and that's I'm sure that's true in many other places as well. So the cathartic thing is that it is truly a time where Democratic Party elites, for really the first time ever, have to really sit and think about why they failed in a way they did not in 2016, because they had all the excuses and Hillary won the popular vote and it was this thing, it was that thing, and they could sort of just pretend. It's done. There's no, and I see this on Twitter too, X, whatever. I see there's like these little shoots of resistance talk and what we remember from 2016-17, but it doesn't really go anywhere. And there's like no resistance. There's no second awakening. I will declare it right now. I will say it on November 7th. The second great awakening is not coming. The social justice left is not rising. Something is coming. But that's not that. And that is very fascinating to me. We could talk about all of that.
Yeah, it's the first election in a long time where one side really has to sit in it and reckon with it, because the Republicans last time, it was stolen, it was mail dumps at night. And this is the first time where it's just sobering. Here's the clear result. It also runs contra to a lot of the media perspective. And this is a whole other conversation. There's some good news, bad news for Democrats, but it's a weird one to digest, because what you're saying about how the Democratic Party ran, or I should say, Trump ran ahead of the Republican Party. So much of the whole electoral strategy by the Democrats was to identify Trump as unpopular and run against Trump. And in the end, he's clearly more popular than his party. And that's some good news, bad news in a way. It's good news for the Democrats because it means that they're not so far out of the game as a party in terms of popularity. And Trump won't be running in theory again, even if he likes to joke about it. Yeah, in theory, I don't think that's constitutionally possible. So
no, it would be that'd be a true coup moment. But Vance will likely be the 2028 nominee. So I imagine there'll be some handoff and he'll be 82 Trump at that point. So I would guess no need for a coup if you've got your guy as the nominee that year.
No need for a coup if you're 82. And I think I want to pause on that one right there, because this is, I will levy a criticism, or I should say a blind spot, because I know people who are all over the map politically. I definitely know a lot of people who are a little bit more in that sort of centrist-y category, and they just kept saying, oh, if the Republicans would just be running away with this, if they just had a moderate, normal Republican nominee. And you would hear this phrase used again and again, and not without basis. But the phrase was unpopular candidate. Trump's unpopular. And I get where it was coming from. I get that survey data said that. I get that there was polling data to suggest that. I get that the unfavorabilities were high. But when you say unpopular, it almost doesn't convey the true nature of whatever this guy is. Because when he walks into 100,000 person packed SEC football stadium, he gets a roar larger than any other person can get. And again, I understand the argument that most people don't feel that way, but that's a kind of popularity. It's a kind of energy. It's something that was converted into the rural areas coming out like crazy, and they aren't always captured in polling. And it's something that Mitt Romney would not have had at his disposal, even if he had similar favorabilities. I don't know what his favorabilities back then were. That was just a name I just pulled out of the air.
They were higher, but yeah, definitely he was not a great presidential candidate. I think that's very true.
And I think that there was a bit of a media projection of how they felt on, and a Democratic projection in conjunction with that onto the electorate. And that just wasn't necessarily the case, just because Trump has a lot of qualities that are unlikable, and a lot of people hate him fervently, and a lot of those people I think are over-indexed in media and the professional class. That doesn't mean that's broadly shared. That doesn't mean that there's an absence of goodwill. And when Andrew Scholes of the Flagrant podcast, for instance, the comedian Andrew Scholes had Trump on, and I was interested to listen to his post-interview podcast where he was shocked by walking around the streets of New York and the reaction and response he was getting walking around the streets of New York. And he was saying a month ago or whenever it was, oh, it's going to be a landslide. And that was revealed to him in that way. There was clearly a level of popularity for Trump that I think many people in media just did not want to see or observe, even though there was a lot of anecdotal evidence to suggest that it was still there and it had grown despite January 6th, despite how so much of the New York Times felt otherwise.
Yeah, it's something I think about too, where I was definitely of the opinion that a quasi-popular conventional Republican could have also beaten Harris and perhaps beaten her by as much or more. But no, I think you make a fair point. I think a few things are true. One is that the conditions were great for the Republican Party in this election because of inflation, immigration, and incumbent parties across the world have been losing. The Conservatives in the UK, Canada Trudeau's party is going to get swamped. You can pick a country in the Western world, or even New Zealand with Ardern, and she was kicked out. Basically, incumbents are getting hammered right now. Inflation, immigration, and that's just a killer. So I think if like a Brian Kemp of Georgia, he never win the primary, but he could have beaten Kamala Harris or Glenn Youngkin, someone like that. I don't know. DeSantis is a weird one because he was so uncharismatic. But I think someone who's a little better. Like again, think back to W. Bush, like a W. Bush, who's the governor of Texas, had a certain charisma and gravitas, beats John Kerry. I think you're right, though. I mean, Trump has real appeal and Trump has multiracial appeal. And that's certainly something that I think you and I were very aware of, but the media class cannot comprehend. I think finally they are. I saw Nicole Hannah-Jones of 1619 fame doing a very long tweet thread today about anti-blackness and white supremacy and the whole 9 yards, and I actually responded to it. It's not getting the same traction, those critiques. I will say that. I'm seeing more and more of the normie, lib, anti-Trump person going, wait, the city of Dearborn, Michigan, which voted 80% for Joe Biden, flipped to Donald Trump. You were talking about Levitard. Miami-Dade County, which was a huge Hillary win 8 years ago, is now a Trump county, right? The Bronx grew
11
its
points,
share.
by the way.
It's hard to fathom. I mean, they meant to Starr. Everyone brings up Starr County in Texas, flipping to Trump the first time since the 19th century Republican took it. I mean, New York City. You can pick a city. I mean, New York's a great example because it's so diverse. The area I live in southern Brooklyn. I think you lived in Sunset Park at one point. Those working class Chinese voters are Republicans now. A state senator, a Democratic incumbent state senator who's Chinese, lost to a Chinese Republican. And Latinos and Asians, certainly. I think the black vote, probably on the male side, definitely. I haven't looked at the exit polls that aggressively yet, but I'm sure the black male vote shifted into the Trump column. It's remarkable. So I think the normie cannot discount that any longer. In 2020, I remember arguing with people about this because you saw the shifts in 2020, the 16 to 20 shifts, the movement into the Republican column for Latino voters in particular. And just a lot of people denied it. They said not true, or they default to, well, it's the white, they do the weird racialism where it's like, oh, it's the Cubans, it's the lighter skinned ones. It was very creepy, but which isn't true. I mean, you could, Trump going to like the Dominican barber shop in the Bronx. I mean, it wasn't effete, light skinned Spaniards sitting in that barber shop, right? We know that's not true. So it is a clarifying moment where if you're a Democrat and you're on the left, you've got to look at these numbers, and these numbers don't lie. And you've got to think about them hard in a way you didn't have to in 2020 because Biden won. And obviously 2016 was its own home.
Completely agree. I'm trying to pull up the numbers for Imperial County, which is the most Hispanic county in California. Yeah. It's to the east of San Diego on the border, because I saw a shocking shift there. Now in California, the vote trickles in via mule week by week. So these things can shift to a degree, but it looks initially like just a absolute massive shift in some of these counties. Last I checked, it was Hillary won it by about 41.5%. And last I checked, Kamala is currently tracking at an 8% advantage there.
I mean, that's just. I mean, those are numbers you don't see, and so that's where it is a moment. I think that's so stark that it makes the debate less exhausting. Again, in a way, I appreciate it because you just don't have. It's white supremacy. It's white supremacy. It's white it's done. You need something new now. And I think what is fascinating, if you're interested in this stuff, that there is going to be a genuine contested fight for the future of the left of center party in America. Yeah. And which never really 2016 it happened to a degree, but let's remember 2016. Hillary froze out the entire Democratic field. 2016 was a very weird primary. It should not have been that way.
Yeah.
It should have been Joe Biden, the sitting vice president, who was not senile at that point, should have been running. It should have been Elizabeth Warren, senator from Massachusetts, Bernie maybe, right? It should have just been a very normal, contested, open primary. Instead, this decision was made. Obama basically made it that said, I support Hillary Clinton. Every Democratic donor and elite, it lined up behind her to the point where his own vice president could not run. It wasn't the Beau Biden thing that was bullshit. It was Joe Biden saw Clinton had the entire Democratic donor apparatus behind her. Not even the endorsements matter. It's the donors. They were with her. Yeah. So it was done. It was locked in. Bernie comes in as an outsider, does very well. But again, it's an insurgent outsider campaign. It's very hard to win those. Trump did, but generally speaking, they don't win. So it was a very weird primary. And then, of course, 2020 is contested to a degree, but that's all about Trump. It's all about beating Trump. COVID happens too. So we're going to have 2028. It's a long time from now, but you will have a very interesting open fight for the future of this party. And I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know who's going to win it. I don't know who's right and who's wrong. I myself am open to many interpretations, but it's going to happen. It needs to happen in a way that it hasn't happened in decades now.
And it shouldn't be so hard for that party to right the ship. I think, as we talked about earlier, the Democratic Party is actually more popular than it seems like they are today. It's just and it's hard for the media to process this. It's that Trump is more popular than the Republican Party. That is one of the upshots of the results currently.
And Harris was an awful candidate. I mean, yes. I want to distinguish too between candidate and campaign, because there's nothing technically wrong. The campaign, like there's no, like, you remember Robbie Mook from like 2016, Hillary's guy, and like they didn't visit Wisconsin, they didn't visit Michigan. You could point to a million technical things that campaign just did wrong, start to finish. I mean, Harris, sure, there are things, whatever, I don't know, money spent there, money wasted here, too many celebrity endorsements, which I agree with, but it's the candidate. Like, that's the thing. The candidate could not articulate a rationale for her campaign. She could not sit down on a podcast like this one and tell you why she wanted to be president. And that's a problem. And that is something that no operative, no James Carville, no magic person can just make you do it. Like, you've got to know, you got to have a vision, right? And it was such a weird campaign where you'd have like libs and Democrats are saying to you, oh, it doesn't matter. She doesn't need a campaign platform. She doesn't need it. She's got a message. It's the vibes. It's this, it's that, it's Brad, it's coconut. And no, Trump had an argument. You knew exactly what Trump was about. Tariffs, anti-immigration, trade, combat inflation, right? I'm not saying these are good or bad things, or he'll even deliver
an issue set.
But it's an issue set. You knew it. It was very easy. No debate, right? Harris, it's like, what? I could not tell you. And I write about this stuff for a living. I don't know what she stood for in those few months she was a candidate. And it was truly, and Biden didn't either. Biden ran on nothing when he was trying to run. So it was just this continual failure.
But Biden, even into his senility, had a political charisma and adroitness that she just didn't have.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I agree. I would say in Biden's defense, even in Hillary's defense too, if they were B-level talents they were, use WAR in baseball, they were at least 2 to 3 WAR politicians, which isn't great, but is like pretty good. Yeah. I mean, Kamala is like a 0 or like a 0.5, or I don't know if she's a negative because she got elected statewide in California.
You're just asking her to bunt. Like, lay down a bunt. Can you lay down a bunt?
Right. You can't be negative WAR if you get elected statewide. That's my rule that I just made up. She's like 0.5 WAR, right? She played a full season and she basically produced no value. Like, that's like the type of politician she is. And that's a problem. That's how you lose the popular vote to Donald Trump.
Trump's a wild pitcher. Could you just take every pitch?
I said this to my friend. Trump's a WAR anywhere from like 2 to 9, and it's like what season you're in, what streak he's on. Like Trump put up an 8-war season. He'll put up like a 2. You're like, what is he doing? Like, there's no like 5-dimensional chess with some of these rallies. Like the RMS, like the Hinchcliffe thing, it didn't hurt him, but like, why do you have a stupid comedian doing stuff? I don't know. It's just like kind of dumb. But no, he's also a great performer. And so you can't argue with that. Like, he has that instinct for performance and even a feel for people that most politicians do not have.
And I think it's an underrated ability to turn out the rurals. This is literally the hardest cohort to reach. Just they're the hardest to reach just by the very nature of living in sparsely populated territories that are far from cities. Somehow this New York real estate tycoon became
remarkable.
The rural whisperer. And I say somehow, there was more to it than somehow. He visited these places. Showing up counts for a lot. Showing up in Dearborn, as Trump did, appears to count for a lot. And that's a big advantage, especially in some of these swing states where the rural population is not insignificant. How we define rural is a little fuzzy, but that might be 20% of the electorate, something like that. If you have 5% more of a 20% slice of the electorate show up in a close election, as our elections often are, that's a huge advantage. And so I think some of these advantages of his, I believe, were underplayed, and underplayed in part because of the typical everybody I know voted for McGovern dynamic. And again, there's some good news, bad news. I think you could take the positive of, if they run a fairly sane, fairly capable politician, they're in a much better spot.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But the bad news part is this. This is the bad news. If we're buying or selling their future as they lick their wounds, losing the keep of Twitter, I think, mattered tremendously. Losing it to Musk.
I was dismissive, but maybe you're right. I've been very dismissive of Twitter mattering still, but maybe it does.
I'm fascinated by this on so many levels. And this is almost a meta commentary on the whole thing, pardon the pun, that Musk, it is actually highly questionable and potentially a problem that somebody in charge of the sense-making meeting waters of media, of journalism, is an active partisan for one side. That is actually something that I think is worthy of questioning at the very least, but you don't even see it because journalists don't even do it, because at some level they all know that they beat back any suggestion that that was a problem before he bought the platform, and basically told conservatives, well, then buy your own Twitter or build your own Twitter. And it happened. And now there's no real response because they never stake out a position that this should be a neutral, nonpartisan meeting ground. And now it's being used to benefit the other side. To what degree can be argued, but it is, and Musk went all in for one side. And we can even have an argument or a conversation about whether it's better that he's overt about it versus the old regime that pretended to be neutral but clearly was not. And he is just absolutely altering the Overton window, and I believe presenting the Democratic Party with problems. I think he's opening up discussions that were not part of the mainstream, that were longstanding practices of that party, and giving it exposure. And now not only do you have questions about what you're doing today, but you've got questions about, well, why doesn't this party favor voter ID? You know, what is with that? And that's something that conservatives said for a while, but now it's getting elevated on the X platform, and it's being discussed on Joe Rogan. And it's things like this that I wonder, is this just going to be a huge issue for them as they lick their wounds and try to recalibrate that their once reliable consensus-making platform has been stolen by the enemy, and is not only preventing them from cohering in a way, because they used to be able to just cohere in real time, but is also elevating the salience of arguments against them. That's a long-winded whatever.
No, right.
You can
Is
take it
Twitter
any which way.
right? Does Twitter kick it? Does Twitter kick anti-democratic arguments or Democrat skeptical arguments up to sort of into the podcast world, which has a very big audience? Like something starts on Twitter, then it's on Rogan. I think it's a good question. Honestly, it's an ecosystem that I'm not as well versed in as I probably should. I don't listen to a ton of podcasts, and I'm still on Twitter, but it's just honestly, I'm so much more into Substack now, and Twitter just doesn't benefit me at all personally. I just don't engage with it much, but I think also that could lead to blind spots and kind of not understanding its new appeal, because I do think it's interesting. The Democrats had someone who had instincts in this direction in understanding some of this. And his name was Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders went on Joe Rogan when he was running for president in 2020. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez attacked him and threatened to unendorse him. I think there is a fascinating dynamic now. I think Bernie's too old to really fight this out, but a sort of, as I think this through in real time, like kind of a left divide that I could see growing between the AOC wing, which went very hard for Kamala. AOC was all over Pennsylvania for Kamala, just a nonstop surrogate. Bernie, who really barely did anything beyond a sort of paper endorsement, just clearly had no interest in her. This divergence, because the old sort of, there were two left views of Rogan and this podcast world. One is don't engage, they're all racist. The other is do engage, that's where voters are. Bernie's instincts were to go there, and he did. Joe Rogan actually endorses Bernie in 2020. He endorses Trump in 2024. In some ways, that is an encapsulation of kind of what happened. If you think about it, I saw something on Twitter or X, whatever, where there was some discussion. Someone was like, the left needs its own Joe Rogan. And someone replied, they had it. Joe Rogan endorsed Bernie. So it was kind of there. It did the alternative, sort of, for lack of a better word, alternative media did not have to be such a right coded thing. If we remember, like Chapo and sort of the dirtbag left, but it's really become a right wing thing, a Trump thing, certainly.
I'll respond to that too, where it's just, oh my God, Aaron Rodgers, he's so MAGA pilled, right wing, disgusting. And I go, yeah, he seemed to be the most liberal quarterback a very short time ago.
He was.
BLM supporting atheist, crunchy, out of Cal,
right,
Aaron
just
Rodgers.
Loves drugs and space aliens and stuff. And that's something actually Matt Iglesias, of all people, writes about this. And I don't always agree with Matt, but I think Matt does have an interesting Substack. And something he said a lot that I think is true, and it's a problem for Democrats, is the weird voter is completely on the right now. And that wasn't true. If you remember, 9/11 conspiracy theories were never right-left coded. Leftists were as much into it. You go back to the 20th century, you pick JFK, you pick anything, aliens, whatever, who built the pyramids. It was not like a left-right thing. And also alternative medicine, right? Anti-vax, go your own way on stuff. I mean, that was a hippie thing, right? I mean, being anti-vax 10 years ago doesn't mean you're like a Republican. It just means you're sort of alternative health type person, I mean, so even like RFK to Trump, right? It's this whole, the Democrats have this attitude that we don't want these people anymore. The problem is there's a lot of these people. They're not like a mass coalition, but there's a lot of people who are vax skeptical, who like alternative things in medicines, who kind of believe some kind of funky things and drift in different places and just don't line up, right? And to win elections, those people. Some of them have to vote for you. Like some of them do, right? And the Democrats chase them out completely.
Trump. Okay, so this is not a comment on Trump is wonderful or he's going to fulfill all his promises. Outside of a disastrous debate, I think he ran a hell of a campaign while much of the legacy media was not crediting him on the basis of strategy because they didn't want it to be true. And one of those great strategic maneuvers was getting RFK to join him and getting RFK off the ballot, which just swings whatever amount of people.
And I'll say I didn't write about it much, but I think I personally underestimated it. Like it wasn't something I promoted and said, "Oh, this is a good move." Or like to me, I just like, okay, RFK endorsed Trump, whatever. But you're right. I think in retrospect, very canny move to pull him into your camp because it was not a fait accompli. There's an alternative universe where RFK is running in the Democratic primary. Democrats make overtures to him and sort of try to bring him into the fold. But the Democrats have become such a COVID hawk party, they could not let themselves do that, even though there was no reason like a vaccine mandate had to be a left-wing thing. Like that's why I was against vaccine mandates, because I believe in civil liberties and employment rights. And I'm pro-labor. So
Yeah.
it didn't have to be that way, but it became that way. And once it became that way, yes, I think Trump saw an opportunity. I think his people did. And to their credit, they completely brought him into the fold. Whatever that was worth, it was worth something. It wasn't worth, millions and millions and millions of votes, but it was the right thing to do strategically, and it worked.
It was, and he seems, frankly, like the weirdest guy in the world. It's just I haven't delved too deeply into the RFK thing.
He's an odd guy. Yeah. He's an odd guy.
He's odd
with some odd relationships in media, which it's a perfect House of Strauss Substack at some point.
I don't know if I'm ever going to go down the RFK rabbit hole, or I think we can already place bets on when him and Trump start feuding and have their breakup.
I think mid 2025.
I think that's something I could definitely see happening, but just on the basis of strategy. I remember him wooing RFK over at a time that many people were acting as though it was the nadir of his campaign, and it was all Brat taking over. And I was watching it happen. I was going, I kind of feel like this guy's making some very savvy strategic moves, and part of that might be the incentive structure. Everybody talks about how the Democrats screwed up by using the lawfare against him and trying to jail him because it ginned up this base that helped him win the primaries. How about it gave a wildly impulsive man a massive incentive to button it the hell up and win an election? If the scenario before Trump was, I win the election or I go to jail, then you're going to see Trump win the...
He was running for his life.
He's going to run the best possible campaign he could run, versus if it's just you win the election or you're back on the golf course. Then things might have gotten a little sloppier, and every week might have been they're eating the dogs and cats. I feel like that's another aspect of, they were just so obsessed with him and bringing him down by any means that it worked against them, and it worked against them in terms of his people, but also probably himself.
I never liked, and I did write a column about this. I never liked the Alvin Bragg indictment. I thought it was a stretch, quite frankly, based on legal precedent. I thought it was a very odd case to bring that the previous DA wanted to bring and could not. Cy Vance, who's the Manhattan DA before Bragg. To me, even if you win the case, it's not worth it. He's not going to, even if he lost, he wasn't going to jail for it. It was a pretty minor infraction based on a strange interpretation of something he did in 2016 with the hush money payments. Was not a fan of that indictment. I thought the one that could have nailed Trump if you were a normal person in a normal context was classified documents, because there are much lesser government people who go to prison for a long time for mishandling classified information. That is something that does happen. But again, the problem with the indictments was none of them rose even close to the level of like even a Watergate style scandal. I mean, Trump, I think, is a corrupt person. I do believe that. I think
How dare you? This is a MAGA podcast now. He won the election, Ross.
I think Trump is personally like a self-dealer. I think he's been that way for decades. I think Trump has skirted the law for a long time. I think the problem is when you finally indict Donald Trump and you're laying out these cases, none of them seem that serious. I think just that was part of the issue. To the average person, you're explaining to them, well, the Jan 6 thing and this, it's like, well, okay, so what did he steal? Like what was the money he stole? What was like the bad law he broke? I mean, what was the Nixon thing where he's, covering up a crime? It was weak. I mean, the issue is they were all just not strong enough. And if you can't build a strong enough a case, just don't build it. I mean, that's the thing. If you can't get there, I think this is more for Bragg. So the Bragg, that's a political decision a DA makes. The federal stuff, I can speak less to. I can say if you can't build a strong case against someone, do not bother. That would be my general legal and political advice, especially in very important people. You've got to get them. You've got to get them on something real. And if you can't get it to something very real, just don't do it. Not worth your time. Not worth the effort.
I think that's a good heuristic in general of don't go too far. And I'll return to that because I think it's so on multiple fronts. I think that they thought civility's out the window because this crazy bully won. So therefore, we don't have to have any discretion with anything we do. And that's part of the story of what happened. I want to make one more point about the rurals, by the way, and this whole sort of projecting the media sensibility on everybody else. I think Trump gets shot. He gets up, he does the fight. And a week later, I felt like everybody at the legacy publications was talking about how it didn't really move the needle. The polls are unchanged. And it's just, whoa, that came and went and the news cycle moves on. And I kept wondering, looking at it going, yeah where we live, I feel like that is a get out the vote operation in of itself. In his places, and I felt like that was an oversight.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Because I think the problem is you had the Biden swap right after that, July 21st. Yeah. But I think you're right in that Trumpy rural zones, that's the news that sticks, and that probably helped him there. I think whereas you couldn't see it in the national polling, but probably if you think of it as a GOTV operation, right?
Yeah,
that
the rurals
it's a nice juice.
Yeah, the rurals appear to have voted their asses off. The rurals did, and I would think that probably, in addition to inflation and a range of other topics, had something to do with that. The don't go too far. This is the thing. If we return to the Democrats as a whole, nobody's actually in control. There's no they.
There's no they. That's the thing to remember. You even saw with Biden dropping out. It was a collective will. Then Pelosi kind of put her hand up and stuck the knife in. But there is no they. It's a really good point. There's no. It's not Obama. I'll let you speak. I have a tangent on Obama. I think this is the twilight. I want to write a piece about this too. But sometimes you speak it out and then it helps cohere your thoughts. I do think this is like the Obama twilight in that.
Yeah.
His influence to me. He's one of the all-time great politicians and historic figure, and not taking that away. His political influence in the current moment is almost non-existent. His surrogate work meant nothing. I think the whole Obama, Biden, Clinton, the operatives they share. You pick a person: Pluff, Axelrod, Jen O'Malley, Dylan, who was running Beto's campaign and then was running Biden's campaign, then did Harris's. All these people, right? All of them. I think this has to be the twilight for all of them. Their moment has passed. Michelle Obama, great public speaker, probably could have ran for president once. She's never going to, but her moment too. They collectively have lost to Donald Trump, and so I think this is to me. I'm not saying in the future Obama can't go out and campaign. To me, this feels like the end of something. It's the end of the Obama sort of, I'm trying to think of the right word. It's not dominance because he's never dominated the party like Trump dominates the GOP. There's some twilight here. There's something that has passed.
There's something weird about him where it's almost like he can't break through the noise in the culture at this point in the social media era, and it doesn't feel like it's a big deal when he's doing something. And if he does a podcast with Springsteen, nobody listens. And
right, his ventures didn't. That's a good point. They didn't like take off. Right, there's nothing he's done post president that has meant anything cultural.
Now, I think his convention speech was widely viewed,
good,
and there's some
Michelle's was too.
Yeah, there's some firmware in the millennial mind that gets highly activated by Obama. I think Obama's legacy now, it's twofold. I think it's the acceleration of the professional class in urban America, but the professional class towards the Democratic Party, and also the reason why a lot of millennial males are libs, for lack of a better word, or
Yes.
Democrat voters. I think that a
And
lot of that has to do with Obama's rise at the time that it happened. As I've talked about in this podcast, we are seeing the opposite thing happen with Gen Z males. And it's something that I think a lot of millennial males, they don't even know what's happening under their generational feet. They don't even know. But I think that's part of it. Like Obama is still with us in a way because of the impact he made on generational cohorts. But I also agree with you that there's something about him right now that just doesn't seem to fit the current.
It's not connecting.
It's
like someone else will have to connect. He's not doing it. Yeah.
It's like he almost doesn't have a weird looseness that fits into the messiness of modern social media. He's of almost a different era, it seems. It's like he's a relic that people mostly look favorably upon, but he almost can't leave that place and arrive where we are. Maybe, and he might like this as a comparison, he's almost like Michael Jordan. He's somebody with a high approval rating who can't return to that moment of his absolute apogee because it's just impossible.
I think that's a perfect analogy. I think that's a great analogy. I think he's the Michael Jordan of politicians. I mean, as much as we're praising Trump's win on Tuesday, Obama 08, I mean, he won Indiana. Like there are states he won that Democrats will never win again. And you look at it's like a different century. It's like 3 centuries ago. He is winning Iowa. I mean, he's flipping counties that are now like 70% for Trump.
His legacy is there, by the way.
Almost Colorado. 60 senators. Colorado is a Democratic state. The Affordable Care Act will not be repealed. So I think that is a legacy. The Republicans officially gave up on getting rid of Obamacare. They kind of accepted it in the firmament. But yeah, no, I think Jordan's like a perfect one down to those Chicago guys. I mean, they were the greatest winners of their time, no doubt. Like the Bull dynasty to like Obama 08 is a very good analogy. I mean, that is still the biggest win in a presidential race we may see in our lifetimes. I don't know if you'll ever see a candidate go up that high in the electoral college popular vote and win and get their party to such a large majority. And the Democrats were almost 60 senators. You won't see it again. But yes, like Jordan could not be a successful owner and just is not, you could speak to it much better than me, but yeah, very much exists as this legacy figure. Obama himself, he's the Michael Jordan of politicians. They'll probably never be like someone who say objectively was more talented in their time, right? Who was more dominant in their era than Obama. And the same thing with Michael Jordan. Jordan is still GOAT, and I think will forever be it. LeBron tried, but I think Jordan wins. And I think that's kind of the consensus.
They both evoke a powerful nostalgia in people.
Yes, very much so. Very much so.
And for people who are voters to the Democratic Party, or a lot of people in cities, they associate Obama with this positive pre-Trump time, and they like seeing him. But at the same time, it just doesn't seem like he can affect the terrain today. He changed things. He won. He's got a legacy. But it's just a fact, people. It just is what it is. Donald Trump is the most consequential politician, at least of my sentience. You could make counter arguments for our lifetimes. Somebody might say, well, Reagan, the Berlin Wall, you can get creative. But you could make an argument, depending on whatever happens over the next 4 years, that you might be in the territory. I sound like Bill Simmons right now. Is he on your Mount Rushmore of post FDR?
So I've been thinking about this. The Trump era I consider the Trump era to have begun with the golden escalator. That is June 2015. Yeah. It will have ended, assuming that he isn't, doing something insane in 2028. It will have ended at the end of 2028. Let's assume that, right? That's a 13-year run, right? The only thing comparable I could think of, in terms of, both Nixon was in the public eye from the time of his vice presidency. He was vice president for 8 years, to then being out, to then running in 68, to then Watergate. Yeah. That is like a 20-year period. Like Richard Nixon might be the only figure that came to mind immediately as someone who was in the public consciousness for a very long time, and people would on the left would talk about Nixon like they talk about Trump today and would compare him to Hitler. I personally am actually quite sympathetic to Richard Nixon. I enjoy reading about him, and he's a fascinating figure historically. And I think he, in some ways, was terrible, but in other ways, unfairly maligned.
Well,
But
he's
Nixon
fascinating.
had that, yeah, and Nixon had, I think, that longevity of where he was in the public eye for a very long time and just meant something to so many people, good or bad. Trump, I think it'll be 13 years when said and done. We'll say that's a long time. That's longer than Obama. That's certainly W. I mean, W is maybe consequential in the sense that he changed. I'd say W changed like the world and certain parts of America much more in terms of like the surveillance state. I do think the W Patriot Act, plus the foreign policy, I would argue for the worse, changed the world to a greater degree. But I think, yeah, Trump more consequential than Obama. Yes, I think that's you can say that. I think that's. I'm not saying good or bad. But consequence. I think so.
I mean, he's completely remade. Nixon. It's hard to do these. It's hard to do these comparisons. Yeah. Nixon almost is in some ways a proto-Trump figure in that he conceived of the silent majority and adopted a style of politics that we would see repeated later on. But Trump has just remade his party completely in a way that is shocking.
In a way, no one, I would say that's true. No politician in modern times has completely, maybe since FDR and the Democrats, has like completely just, FDR left like a 30-year legacy in the Democratic Party where people were running on the New Deal legacy into the 1970s. I think Trump and the GOP, that's right, that he so thoroughly dominates it in a way that one could never have imagined in 2015. Yeah. Never.
Completely counterintuitive ways that nobody could have expected. Things that we're talking about, the aforementioned shifts in Starr County on the border that are achieved with immigration hawkishness. These are things that no consultant could have ever predicted. And we'll see what happens over the next 4 years and what just wild scenarios come forth. But I think I want to get back to the topic of going too far.
Yeah.
I don't know how much the people who have the real juice in the Democratic Party and media organs that are aligned with them have the ability to say we have gone too far culturally. It seems it's really hard for them to do that. And I think the ad that is going to stick with people from this election season, the ad I have seen most frequently referenced, and today there was something about how the Trump campaign was shocked at how strong the responses were. It's that ad where the final tagline is, "She's for they, them, Trump is for you." That ad right there. There is a culture problem or a going too far problem that this party has run into that I think is the elephant in the room for a lot of the pullback with minority voters. And you see people nibbling around that. Nate Cohn had something weeks ago about why are voters from some of these demographics coming to the Republican Party. And I felt like this was just this elephant in the room that questions, just the inability. You can argue, and people argue. They go, well, this isn't the most important issue. The issue of, for instance, I've talked about males in women's sports. This isn't the most important issue. I get it. But that just seems to be one of a variety of issues that made this party seem crazy, where the public was maybe 75% in opposition. And there was just this inability. What do you make of that inability of people in media and in the party to go, yeah, that's too far. That's too far.
I think that, so I'll say this. I think party elites and party operatives are aware of it. Kamala Harris's convention speech was quite anti-woke. And I think in her own way, to her credit, I mean, she was not a good politician, but she understood this and framed her candidacy. She did not talk about really identity much at all in her campaign.
True.
She ran a fairly disciplined campaign. I mean, her problem was a lack of message, but she and her people did get that. I do think the temperature on a lot of woke left things is coming down. And I think Trump being in power in a weird way might take them down further. Whereas last time you had the awakening, this time I'm not seeing it. And I think that, for example, if Democratic politicians move off this stuff, and I think they are, I think if you look at like the senators who ran, and won, the candidates who won, they've moved off this stuff. I think if they're moving off of it message wise, when Republicans talk about it, it's going to sound a little stranger when Trump is president because he'll be in power, right? Remember, Biden was in power. When the Democrats are in power, you can blame them for everything, including all the social justice stuff, all, you name an issue that seems like it's gone too far, you can blame them. I think if Trump is president, you can't do it quite in the same way. And I do think that the politicians and the operatives themselves are aware of that messaging problem. And I've seen a decrease in sort of social justice and woke lingo. Dave Weigel of Semaphore actually writes a lot about this, and he obviously travels across the country covering these races, but he watches a lot of political ads. If you see like the Democratic political ads in congressional races, it is very bread and butter now. Like I think the messengers are there on that. The issue is you've got a legacy, and you certainly have still some people and some politicians talking this way. I think that I see it. I just see that temperature coming down more and more.
But they can't do the Sister Soldier for whatever reason.
They can't do the Sister Soldier. No, they cannot. Look, I think it's hard. I'll say this as someone who knows a lot of trans people, and I do support trans rights myself. I have family who are true trans. It's hard because there are two things that are true at once, and I don't really want to go down this road too much.
Oh, that's
a lot of the people who talk about the problem of like the Leah Thomas problems of the world, right? Who I think are correct. The Leah Thomas thing was an issue. It was a problem. You can't have someone who is a man and very quickly transitions and dominates female sports. It is a very strange thing to happen. Or the people who like Martina Navratilova, one of the great tennis players of all time, has spoken about this, the fact, biological women in women's sports. Martina Navratilova is very progressive. She's very liberal. It's just on this issue, she codes right. Like they're correct. Like there is a reason there are biological differences between men and women when it comes to sports. That is inarguable. Men are faster and stronger on average, and the elite male athletes are much faster and stronger. That is all true, right? I will say the issue is the people who do get hung up on this a lot, I do think also dislike trans people, and they are anti-trans, and they reject the idea that an adult wants to transition and should have rights. Like I think if you are 18 years old, you make a decision, you want to transition, that's how you feel, that's how you're born feeling, you should have the right to do it. You should have all the civil rights protections that come with it. The issue is I think there are people who don't believe that, who think trans people are lesser than. I am against those people. But the under 18 debate is a real one. So I don't want to go down the rabbit hole too much. But in Europe, they have moved in a very different direction than left in America, where I think in the UK now, I don't follow it super closely, but if you're under 18, you can't transition, or it's hard to. And I do think children should be of age, just like you should be of age to drink alcohol or vote. You should be the age to make a decision that will change your body forever. I do believe that. But again, the problem is with these issues, there's like no nuance, right? You've got the people on one side who just say, if you say anything about being of age to transition, you're a transphobe. Well, I don't think that's true. But then you've got literal transphobes who are like, there's no such thing. Trans is fake. They're all fake. They don't deserve anything. They shouldn't get a gender neutral bathroom. Like they deserve to die, whatever. So it makes it hard. The Sister Soldier thing, to come back to your previous point, there's just it's a messy issue. It's a super messy issue where if you come out and say, yeah, the Leah Thomas thing is weird, but I support trans rights, like you're going to get killed on some side by someone.
I think you're gonna have to because I think
don't know.
we talk about the death of certain things and what is over, and I think the era of I'm not going to establish a guardrail, but I'm going to call anybody who does a bigot.
Yeah,
I think is insufficient. I think, and that's true on the board, and that's true on the border. It's true with immigration.
Yeah.
I think,
and
it's
when
true
the Democrats have shifted very much, Trump has shifted them on the border. I mean, Harris, and now I think the next Democrats that run, the congressional candidates, you are seeing the tough on border rhetoric. Which, for the record, Bernie Sanders always an anti-open borders guy and used to get a lot of crap from it because the old socialist position was to be actually anti-open borders because which it does, it can cheapen labor and undercut unions. But yeah, no, I think it's easier on immigration. This stuff's harder. Do you have to have? I don't know if you have to have this. I guess I'll disagree and say I don't know how necessary it is. I think issues just come and go. I think obviously, okay, I'm trying to think of a good issue. People used to talk about. I mean, terror. Okay, this is a great example. Terrorism. Terrorism 20 years ago was like the number one. We remember we're of age. Like Gen Z people don't get it. 20 years ago, all anyone talked about was terrorism. Like the Republicans had it as like number one culture war issue. It was also a real issue because 9/11 happened.
There was going to be a dirty bomb in New York.
Everything, subway bomb, dirty bomb, are Democrats insufficiently tough on terrorism? It was the height of Islamophobia. Arabs who pre 9/11, the Arab American vote was actually pretty Republican, shifts left because of 9/11 and the Islamophobia. So terrorism was like the defining issue of our times into the 2010s, and then it just goes away, right? I don't know. Yeah. It's interesting to think about the issues that everyone would talk about and debate about and fight about just vanish. And I don't know, inflation. I think they got to bend over time.
I think they got to bend.
I don't know if you have to. I think you move. You just move on. I don't know if it's like Prop 1 in New York passed. Good example. I mean, it's New York. It's a blue state. They're getting redder. Prop 1 in New York was actually codifying abortion rights into the state constitution, but it had a line about gender identity in there. And Republicans ran a very aggressive campaign against Prop 1, saying that it would put all these men into women's sports and create this like flood of male athletes in high school sports. And it got like Prop 1, there was a pretty loud anti-Prop 1 movement, but I think it ended up, I have to look at the numbers, it ended up like 30-something% total. Like the Prop 1 passed pretty easily. So it's a weird issue. I don't know. Do they have to bend the knee? I'm not convinced they do. I will say I'm not convinced they have to. I think you can just ignore it and let it pass and start to talk about other things. I mean, immigration, you have to talk about. I think that's bigger. I think the economy is always big. You're going to have to deal with that inflation. And I think the future crop of presidential candidates on the Democratic side know this. I mean, the sad truth is about the Democratic Party is, they put forward like among their least talented people. I don't know what the sports analogy is where you have like a deep roster and you're starting five or like you're erratic and bad players, and the bench is really good and the bench can't get in the game. Like it's 3 election cycles, Hillary, Biden, Kamala. These 3 people are like B talent at best, right? At best, they're Bs. They might be Cs. Kamala might be a D. There's no A's in the bunch. But the Democrats, like at least now they've got like B pluses, right? They've got some B pluses, and they're people who just won tough races in tough states and appealed to a lot of different voters, right? You kind of have to be good at that point. So these people like can't get in the game, right? Kamala and the Democrats wouldn't let them get in the game, or Biden wouldn't let them get in the game.
Well, there's so much happening there. I think B talents for some of them, but maybe A plus brands at the time they ran. But what you're saying is true. And the irony of it all is it's true in part because Trump, when he's not running, is a terrible party leader who taps wacky people who lose races, and a lot of the people
Right. His people
who
lose. Yeah, he wins.
well, they lose to these
How many
people that
Trumpers
deep
have
at the
like
bench.
blown elections? Yeah, it's interesting to think about like Trump and the party remade the party hugely influential. He's also like owned gold the Republican Party a lot. Like the 2022 midterms, you have like Blake Masters like running in Arizona, and all these just wacky, untalented people losing to Democrats who are pretty normal in these campaigns. If you think about like Clinton, Biden, Harris, between the three of them, they won almost no competitive races in general elections before they were
Yeah.
elected. They all competed in states that were very democratic for many decades. Like these were three politicians. I think Biden was the best of the bunch. I really do. And I think Biden helped Obama. But you think about Joe Biden, ran for president twice, flamed out. 1988, couldn't get off the ground. Oh wait, collapses. Obama makes him VP. Hillary Clinton is handed a Senate seat in New York State after her husband is president, loses to Obama. Then the party is like, time to anoint this person. Why? And in what world are you anointing the runner-up who is coming from New York in a race that she never had to compete in? Because New York is a tough state. She didn't have to win a 10-way primary to become senator of the state of New York. And then Harris, I mean, you know Harris in California, and you almost had a president from the Bay Area. So close yet so far, right? I mean, the AG's race in 2010 was almost the Republican. She nearly lost. Like that's insane.
Yeah,
it's
an unlosable
nuts.
Race.
It's insane. And yes. The Senate seats handed to her, if I recall, the 2016 Senate race was not competitive. And then she loses for president. She runs on the worst presidential candidates, like campaigns anyone's ever seen, gets outpolled by Andrew Yang, is outdebated by Tulsi Gabbard. These are all true facts. And she drops out for the Iowa caucuses because the only thing she has going for her is she is savvy and she knew when to quit. She knew she wasn't going to go to Iowa and get 2%. She walked away, and that helped pave the way, along with the awakening in 2020, to her ascension to VP. And that's like the story of the Democratic Party. And all this time, there are these other politicians who just could have been the nominees.
But it didn't happen arbitrarily. I think that this is part of their worldview.
It's just funny. No, it's not. Yeah, it's funny how these things
But what I'm saying is, it's their worldview is infected by DEI consideration to a degree that undermine them at the top.
True. Well, I think that made Hillary, that pushed Hillary up in 2016. We have to have a woman president. I think it's like DEI, but it's also like picking the wrong ones. Like there's many talented. I made this point on Twitter. Today or yesterday, there's tons. 3 swing states, 3 female senators just won very tough swing states. Jackie Rose in Nevada, Slotkin in Michigan, Tammy Baldwin has won again in Wisconsin. Klobuchar, I'm not even like a huge fan of her. She keeps winning in Minnesota. She outruns the ticket every single time. Yeah. Every single time she does it. They're there. Like one of them could have been a VP. Klobuchar could have been your VP in 2020. I'm not saying she's amazing, but she got further than Harris. She got to New Hampshire. She's got some charisma. She's appealed. She was a DA also, but I think, has more political sense. And these people don't get elevated. So it's a DEI thing, but it's like dumb DEI. It's like you want to do DEI, but find the Obamas, find the talented women, right? Find the good ones.
But I think we just need to say, looking back, it was insane when Biden appointed his VP that he said it had to be a black woman. That means that it has to be somebody from 6.5% of the population.
Yes, you narrow I agree. He should have just said a woman and left it at that. And if it falls to just say a woman, which is fine. I think it's defensible. It's half the population. A lot of good women that's the thing, is a lot of great women politicians. So you're doing identity politics, but there's old school identity politics. I mean, I'm from New York City. New York City, go back 70 years ago, you're running tickets with Irish, Italian, and like Jewish politicians and literally splitting them up based on like last name. That's a thing. It's not like DI is like newer, but like identity politics is old as time. So, pick a woman and find a strong politician, someone who's won in a swing state, right? Or who's shown they'd appeal to a lot of
But
people and is battle tested, and they didn't do it. That's where
this
we
is a
are.
tricky conversation because identity politics in some ways has been discredited by the election, but it exists for a reason to a degree. And
Yeah, it matters. I mean, Obama mattered. Electing a black president mattered. Like, it was a big deal. I mean, it was a historic, you can get so anti DEI, like, not you, it's like the people out there can get so anti DEI. You forget, like, electing a black president named Barack Obama was a very big deal for the United States of America. And it proved that he could do it. There are all these canards about a black man can't win. You can't win with a funny name. You can't be this. You can't be that. I mean, the beauty of that race was it proved that was wrong. And it proves, and as we know now, many different types of candidates can win. You got to be good. You got to be talented. You got to have something, right? And there's many black politicians who do. There's many women who do. It's just the Democrats. I think you have the DEI brain, but it's also like DEI paired with this very bizarre, like, I'm trying to think of the right word, because it's not meritocracy. It's like
it's their turnism.
It's their turnism. There you coined something. Their turnism. I think that's right. It's like it's their turn, and usually them is like either a group or it's like a very specific individual. Well, in the case of Clinton, it was like she's got to get it. It's like, why?
Well,
why does she have to get it?
If you want to go back in time, that's what crippled the Republicans in 1996. It's Bob Dole's turn.
Yeah,
it's his turn.
Yeah. It was his turn. Yeah, it's a good point.
He's been around. It is his turn, and whenever it's your turn, it's not actually your turn.
It never is. No, and that's the beauty of the Democratic Party now. It's no one's turn. No one. It is wide open. No one's turn. It ain't Shapiro's turn. It ain't Whitmer's. You got to go and win it. Like, that's the thing. It is it's going to be a meritocracy of a primary, and that you got to go win it. There's no.
Yeah. Heath Ledger's Joker has split the pool cue into this sharp spear and dropped it in the middle of the party, and people are going to fight it out. And it's 4 years from now, but really 3 years from now, I'm already curious.
The shadow primary, honestly, it starts now. It's going to start the minute Trump takes office. Or before. I mean, the Shapiros of the world. I'll say this: no one was probably outside of Trump and his family and like the MAGA heads. No one was happier about election night than Josh Shapiro. Like, you think about it, if Harris wins this race,
Joe Biden was smiling pretty big on the TV.
Joe Biden maybe. Biden's a guess. The Biden people were happy. But for Josh Shapiro, someone like that, if Harris wins, he's got to wait till 2032 because Harris is the nominee in 28. That is 12 years between primaries and the Democratic Party. 2032, a political lifetime away. Who the heck knows what's going to happen? Now he gets a shot. Whitmer, Kelly. I mean, you pick any Democrat, senator, governor, Buttigieg, whatever. Everyone's in the game now. So. And it's going to start the shadow campaign, the going around the country, going on TV. The smart ones are going to be going on the podcast. Buttigieg, who I have politically criticized before, he also was very early to the idea because he had Liz Smith as a consultant, and Liz Smith knows this. When he ran for president, he was on every single podcast and media channel imaginable. Nothing was too small for him.
He's an excellent performer. I think he missed his shot, though. I think he missed his shot.
He probably did. He probably missed it. Others will follow that lead and do what he did, which is smart, which is go everywhere.
I'll explain what I mean by that. I think that when he was transportation secretary, is he still? I mean, who's running that right now?
He still is. He's still he will be. He'll be leaving soon.
It just doesn't matter as much now that now the pandemic is over. But I think that if he had signaled more openness to going against the hawkishness of the admin when that was a topic, he could have differentiated himself and given himself more of a moderate branding. But instead, he was lockstep, masks on the airplane. I think that was a moment where he could have gone against party and defined a little bit. But that's my take. Well, that's the least relevant takeaway.
and he's too professional class. I think Buttigieg has a lot of good instincts, but he also just comes off as too Harvard, too practiced. I do think he, it's look, everyone who's running for president is professional class in some way, but you need, Obama was able to reach people who are not professional class. I don't know if Buttigieg can do that. I think someone in the party can. I'm not convinced he can do it, but it begins. I mean, the shadow primary, it starts. It's probably starting now. I mean, I'm not like a beat reporter in the way I used to be. So I'm not like calling up sources and finding out. I don't care enough. But I'm sure like right now, Josh Shapiro is like on the phone with people. You just talk. You start talking to donors. You signal. You send the wink wink signals. They're going to start giving speeches next year, traveling. I mean, Ro Khanna is another really interesting guy to watch here. He's not your He's not your congressman, but he's sort of
not mine.
area.
I've got the honey pot. I've got the honey pot man as my congressman.
Yeah, like Ro Khanna is an interesting guy. He's been just traveling America for years now. I mean, he's a very smart guy. Kind of has been doing sort of this populist left thing and just going to rural areas now for a long time. So it's open. It's anyone's game. It truly is. And that's
Andrew Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo hat in the ring.
If he runs for mayor, if he's looking, Eric Adams has not resigned. So Eric Adams also a very happy man on election night. Eric Adams, because he wants to get pardoned by Trump. That is a thing. So Eric Adams will not be reelected mayor. There's no way he'll win next year. But if he gets convicted, Donald Trump, he's hoping to be blessed. And maybe Eric Adams becomes a MAGA guy in 2 years. I would not be shocked by that if he just goes and becomes a MAGA man.
Well, at least a lot of Josh Shapiro buzz. We will see if the Democratic Party is ready for a short president is what we will see.
A lot of Jews won. We can say it's a Jewish people. Big night for Jews. Slotkin, a Jew born in New York City, becomes a senator in Michigan. Rosen, everyone forgets she's Jewish. She was like a synagogue press. She's like very Jewish. She won in Nevada again. The Jews continue to represent. Can say that as a Jewish person.
And Miriam Adelson won with Trump.
Right. The Jews are controlling the Republican Party, and they're very important in the Democratic Party. So you can't lose if you're a Jewish person. You control all the levers of power. Still running the NBA,
of course.
Thankfully,
not so much the NFL.
No, and not MLB, but in New York, the Jews run the Mets, so that's something. A Jewish owner and GM.
Yeah, you'd think the results would be better, but
they're getting there. The Mets are getting better. That's why I thought the Mets would be good this year because of David Stearns, being smart, but also a New York Jew. You want to get them involved in things.
You'll always have the Pete Alonso opposite field home run against the Brewers.
Yeah,
you'll always have that.
And I'll see it. I'm a Yankee fan, so you can taunt me.
I mean, I don't know.
Another thing.
I forget about that sometimes. You present. I'm a Yankee guy. You're ethnically.
I'm a Yankee. I'm a huge Yankee fan because I'm Jew. Well, there was this whole huge fight which you would love. Did you see the New York Magazine piece about how the Mets are all PMC class like gentrifiers? And I didn't write the piece, but I tweeted it.
True.
So everyone just attacked me. People hated the piece, but it's true. The gentrifier class loves the Mets in New York, and real New York loves the Yankees. And so I'm real New York. But the Yankees had a rough time. Lost to California.
The Yankees,
not your part of California.
The team of the working class and the team of Donald Trump, the New York Yankees.
That's it. They are the team of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a soft Yankee fan. That is a fact. They are the team of the working class and Donald Trump. But I'm sure Steve Cohen will cut checks to Trump too, because that's what rich people do. So I'm sure he will. Sure, he's going to do it. Mets.
From Queens and a Yankees fan. So interesting, that sort of trajectory. Brooklyn. No, I'm talking about Trump. I'm not talking about you.
Oh, Trump. Trump. I was like, me. Yeah, I mean, Trump. I don't know why he. I think it is interesting because he's just always kind of been a Yankee guy. I think he's probably friends with Steinbrenner. I'm sure it's something like that. He's just been, but he's like soft Yankee. He isn't like, he used to tweet about them like in the 2010s, but he's not like, doesn't talk about it a ton anymore. He had a rant about baseball recently at one of his rallies that was pretty funny, where he said like the games have to start earlier, which they have actually been starting earlier in the World Series. But I think he wants like the 1 p.m. World Series, which is not going to happen.
Well, he
ever
should
again.
get Elon on that one.
Mm.
I think his anti NFL kickoff rule has been some effective populism. But I am wrapping it up. I apologize for interrupting
Sounds good.
so much, but
Oh no,
since
this is great. This is so
but
fun.
well, yeah, but since Trump has won, race science is now legal, and Ashkenazi Jews interrupt each other. There is science and survey data to back that up. It's just par for the course, and a lot
It
of you
is.
have to suffer through it when I have Glass-Steagall on. Ross,
Oh
what do
yeah.
you want to promote for us on the
It's always the
outro?
Substack. Subscribe to my Substack. It's called Political Currents. If you search my name, Ross Barkan, and you'll find it, rosselliotbarkan.com, but you can find it pretty easily. So subscribe to my Substack. That's where all the good stuff is, and that's what I have most fun doing.
I can't believe we didn't talk about the Jewish defection from the Democratic Party. Maybe next time. Maybe next time
Next time.
it'll
Next
be
time.
it'll be whatever it is. All right. Thanks so much, Ross. This has been great.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me.